I'm Dave Sobush, Director of Research and Policy at the Florida College Access Network. I'm delighted to be your host today after a session for the ages. More than 1,950 bills filed, only 250 or so making it across the finish line to become law. Running 45 days longer than normal, the legislature adjourned sine die June 16th, and the Appropriations Act was signed by Governor DeSantis on June 30th. Hopefully, Memorial Day vacation plans for our friends in the process turned into great Independence Day memories. We have an outstanding lineup of speakers and great information to share with you this afternoon. Our keynote speaker and very special guest is Senator Alexis Calatayud from District 38 in Miami, Chair of the Senate Post-Secondary Education Committee. Chair Calatayud will provide a leadership perspective on key 2025 legislation impacting post-secondary access and student success and Senate education priorities for 2026. Additionally, Nicole Washington of Washington Education Strategies and Sarah Foster, FCAN's policy analyst, will cover new legislation that will impact Florida students and highlights of the budget. Before we get started with today's presentation, I'd like to remind everyone of a few housekeeping items. First, this is an interactive webinar, and we welcome your questions. You can submit your questions in the Q&A box in the dashboard, and we'll take time during the webinar to answer them. Second, please share what you are learning on social media. We love to hear what's resonating with you. Be sure to tag us, and let's keep the conversation going. Finally, this webinar is being recorded, and all materials will be made available within a week of the recording. I know we have quite a few listeners today who may be new to FCAN's work. To give you a little background on who we are, FCAN's mission is to lead the collaborative movement to ensure every Floridian achieves an education beyond high school and a rewarding career. Our vision is to see a Florida working together where education is the pathway to economic mobility for all. FCAN's work spans across several areas, with a core focus on helping Florida achieve its Sail to 60 goal. This goal, established in 2019 to ensure Florida is the #1 state for workforce and talent, is to increase the percentage of working-age Floridians with a high-value post-secondary certificate, degree, or training experience to 60% by the year 2030. Currently, we stand at 55.1%. Whether a student chooses career and technical education, 2-year or 4-year degrees, education after high school is the pathway to achieving Florida's economic goals and prosperity for its residents. FCAN's work spans across research and policy and leads a state network of local college access networks to help students continue their education beyond high school and more. FCAN's work is guided by our 7 conditions for success, which are listed here, and you can find more about on our website. The legislative process can impact each of these, and key laws passed this recent session will have a positive benefit on clear information and guidance, affordability, and multiple pathways to success. Let's hear more about some of those new laws from Sarah Foster, FCAN's policy analyst. Sarah joined FCAN in January and is responsible for all of our legislative and agency tracking. We're happy she's part of this team, and the virtual floor is hers. Sarah, take it away.
Thank you, Dave. And good afternoon, everyone. There's a few policies I'd like to cover that impact post-secondary success. The first is HB 1255. This bill was sponsored by Representative Trabulsi in the House and Senator Calatayud in the Senate as SB 1618. Now, Senator Calatayud will discuss this bill shortly, but I want to highlight a key provision that was a priority of FCAN. HB 1255 expands the high school financial literacy course to include instruction on the FAFSA, the cost of post-secondary education, and financial aid options available to students. The specific language is in blue. For background, high school students must take a half credit in personal financial literacy in order to graduate. During the 2022 session, Florida made it a graduation requirement for incoming classes. And the goal has really been to just empower students with the financial management skills to excel in adulthood. So you'll see topics like managing a bank account, understanding credit, even how to do your taxes is included in this curriculum. Students take the course between 9th and 12th grade and in person and offered online. So the expansion of this curriculum to include instruction on the FAFSA is important. The FAFSA is a form needed to access federal, state, and local financial aid. And this aid can be used toward post-secondary education. The reality is that Florida has a low FAFSA completion rate, currently ranking 39th out of the 50 states and DC. That means students are not applying for the FAFSA. Perhaps they didn't know about it, missed a deadline, or didn't have access. And as a result, are missing out in millions of Pell dollars. Florida students left $240 million on the table. So what you should know about this law is it better informs students on the costs of post-secondary education and options like FAFSA that can assist in financing that education. A very exciting policy for students. Moving on, incentive funds for accelerated programs like dual enrollment, AP, IB, and others survived. There was quite a bit of concern this session, and I'll do my best to explain. This session preserved funding for accelerated programs, but changed the funding mechanism. A separate fund was established totaling $596 million that the Department of Ed will release to school districts. Previously, the funds these programs generated were attached to the FEFP base student allocation. Allowable uses for those funds were outlined in statute, with each district allocating a certain percentage of those funds to high schools that generate the funds to be reinvested back into the program, as well as a certain amount could be spent on teacher bonuses. This new law makes it clear that funds cannot be used to supplement the base student allocation. And there are also new reporting requirements for school districts. This next law came out of the special session C in February, and this was the repeal of the out-of-state fee waiver for undocumented students. Florida repealed the 2014 law that permitted some undocumented students to receive an out-of-state fee waiver and pay in-state tuition prices at a state university, college, career, and technical centers. Now, only US citizens or those lawfully present in the US having met certain criteria are eligible for the waiver. Reevaluation of students that receive an out-of-state fee waiver is currently underway. And did want to mention there's around 6,500 students that currently receive an out-of-state fee waiver between Florida colleges and state universities. Next up is the elimination of the certificate of completion. Students will no longer receive a certificate of completion from high school. For background, a certificate of completion, or COC, is a document that a student receives, often at graduation, that indicates the student completed high school, but it is not a standard high school diploma. A COC is given when a student fails to earn a 2.0 GPA or fails one of the standardized tests required for the standard diploma. Representative Susan Valdez sponsored this specific policy and often acknowledges the COC is of limited value to the student. She's carried some form of this bill each year since being elected, and it passed this year. This new law also requires the Department of Education to develop a document that outlines options for students that fail to earn a standard diploma. I quickly wanted to mention the young adult student housing law that passed. Under this new law, colleges and universities are now required to develop plans that prioritize housing for vulnerable students, especially those who have experienced homelessness or have been part of the foster care system. In addition, this law calls for a study to be completed by next year that will examine the barriers these students face when trying to access housing. You may be asking yourself, what is next? With the 2025 session officially in the books, what is next? Implementation and preparing for the 2026 session. It's important to understand that once a new law is passed, it requires proper implementation among the agencies and departments responsible for enforcing that new law. So you can think of it as policy and implementation, and that implementation is that practice. Preparing for the 2026 legislative session is also ahead. Committee weeks begin in October. Session begins in January. It will be a short yet productive summer for lawmakers and those in the process, I'm sure. And that concludes my portion.
Thank you, Sarah, very much for a great update. It's now my distinct pleasure, and I am absolutely delighted to introduce our very special guest, Senator Alexis Calatayud. First elected to the Florida Senate in 2022, Senator Calatayud serves as Chair of Post-Secondary Education, Vice Chair of Pre-K-12 Education, and is a member of both Education Appropriations Committees. Before joining the Senate, she served as the Director of Policy and Programs at the Florida Department of Education. Prior to her role in legislative affairs at FLDOE, Chair Calatayud was Representative Vance Lupas's campaign manager in his successful 2018 and 2020 campaigns, growing his margin of victory by 15 points in between those two elections, and served as his legislative aide from 2018 to 2020. A proud alumna of Florida International University, Go Panthers, Chair Calatayud was elected to student body president twice. Upon graduation from FIU, she partnered with national nonprofit organizations to train Florida student leaders on candidate engagement strategies in advance of the 2016 campaign cycle in order to center candidate focus on issues that mattered to students: post-secondary affordability, student loans, and cost of living. Later, moving to Washington, D.C. to broaden the scope of this work at a national scale. Chair Calatayud believes educational opportunity means we ensure every child can achieve the American dream through high-quality, accessible VPK-12 education, affordable post-secondary programs, and workforce training that aligns with the jobs of the future. Chair Calatayud, we're over the moon to have you with us and share some of your thoughts about the 2025 legislative session, both broadly and specific to post-secondary access and student success. The floor is yours, and I'll rejoin you for Q&A in a bit.
Thank you so much. It's an absolute pleasure to be with you all. And I'm so grateful for the opportunity. When I was a student leader, I worked with FCAN and with the National Access Networks to talk about student issues and focus them amongst the Florida legislators. So it's really a pleasure. And it's an honor to serve under President Alberton as the chair of post-secondary education. I can tell you, our focus in the Senate right now is how to balance our efforts with the House of Representatives in attaining a balanced budget while making continued investments in stride in our higher education system, the entire post-secondary education system. For me specifically, that's a huge balance between the quality programs, but continued investment directly into students. One of the treasured conversations I've had with current Senator, former Governor Rick Scott, was the value of tuition freeze for in-state students, and the reality that the importance of higher education in the state of Florida rests with highest value in helping low-income students and first-generation students attain a credential, attain a meaningful degree. So that kind of is the focus of my work as chair of the Post-Secondary Education Committee, in collaboration with Chair Harrell, who is the Appropriations Chair for Post-Secondary Education. So my focus is the balance between expanding, supporting access, particularly for low-income and first-generation college students, while also understanding the important confines of balanced budget and the dance that the Florida Senate engages with the Florida House to find ways in a continually fiscally constrained time period to walk the line that empowers our state economically and, driving factor for me, ultimately undermines and reduces generational poverty through credential attainment.
Well, thank you for that overview, Senator. If we could kind of put our heads back in maybe late 2024, what were your thoughts coming into the session, and what did you want to accomplish, and where did you want to focus?
One of my interest areas was the creation, particularly in the post-secondary education system, of an additional lever for investment in post-secondary, which was to create an online out-of-state tuition bracket that would provide both colleges and universities the opportunity to bring in more funding opportunities to reinvest into their institutions in a particularly challenging fiscal environment for the state, while maintaining the continued freeze of tuition for in-state students. So that's something that we worked on, and we're working through both of the chambers. We also had pretty significant conversations with the House on what should come next within the university president search process, as well as the university and college trustees process. That legislation did not move forward at the final piece of session, but robust conversations took place throughout. And I think there's still a lot of discussion to be anticipated in the future 2025-2026 session.
Yeah, many times it does take a few bites at the apple to move legislation forward, which is a good segue, I think, into this next question. For a few years, FCAN and others had been advocating for a universal FAFSA policy with an opt-out. This year, we saw FAFSA language appear in no fewer than 4 bills, one of which was your sponsored Senate Bill 1618. Can you talk a little bit about the motivation for including the importance of FAFSA instruction in the personal financial literacy and money management course, and why you decided to include that in that large education bill?
Absolutely. It was actually in conversation with Senate leadership as well as the Senate minority legislators. And I would say that policy, alongside universal access for SAT and ACT prep programs, which was added within one of the post-secondary omnibus vehicles at the end of session. Those two hand in hand were something we should be doing, something that helps more and more students. And so in conversation, particularly with minority Deputy Leader Tracy Davis, were priorities that she had helped champion for a while, and that as we were developing the policy, one of the higher education bill that ultimately became one pre-K through 20 education bill, as we worked that policy through the process, we made sure to add additional policy that aligned to our same vision and mission of bills that either had died or had not yet been filed in that format. So we really wanted to take the opportunity with the moving vehicle to pack it with as much flavor as possible, issues that were important, particularly in a time where we talk about who are the students that we should be championing and creating greater pathways for. And I spoke about this a great deal during session in bill presentations. It has to be low-income students. That is the game changer.
Absolutely. Couldn't say it better myself, Madam Chair. The impact in this, of course, your work both in the legislature at DOE and in your work prior to entering into the DOE related to student success and student access. It truly is the pathway towards enhanced economic mobility. And we thank you for your work on that bill. Now, that bill eventually was laid on the table for Rep. Trabulsi's bill to get, put forward. There were so many bills. I mentioned some of the stats prior to you joining. I mean, as in every session, close to 2,000 bills filed and fewer than 250 making it across the finish line. Why was it so important to get that piece of education policy passed this session?
That particular bill morphed so many times. It had a lot of components that I cared deeply about. And it had a couple of components that in the final product that I wanted in there that weren't in there. And then it also had some content that I didn't believe in that had to be removed, and we negotiated it out. So that was a really interesting package for me. As I mentioned, it was birth through 20 policy, ultimately in its final phase. One of the items that's not explicitly connected to the work we're talking about with post-secondary college access, but was a huge deal, was the expansion of income eligibility for school readiness, the state subsidized childcare program. That was one of the many pieces that mattered a lot to me, because those are the same families either seeking higher workforce credentials or in the workforce making it happen for their families. I care a great deal about two-generation prosperity initiatives and the idea of helping mom and dad while we're helping kids succeed in school. And at multiple points utilizing the levers to increase economic mobility, both for mom and dad, but to ensure that child's equipped to take whatever post-secondary route possible. So for me, that 1255 in every piece that did end up passing was very much a uphill battle to find out between the chambers. And this is one of those fun pieces where, you know, not everybody likes everything. So you have to pick and choose your babies. But the elements of the policy that passed were things that the House and Senate felt confident that we could all champion together. I think that's one of the pieces of policy that parts of policy that we don't weigh sometimes, that not everyone thinks at every moment something's a good idea. We have to find the middle ground. So a lot of this all of this policy in 1255 found that middle ground.
Yeah, that's very well said, of course. And you know, certainly the work to modify the income limits, reducing that benefits cliff, allowing, you know, both parents, you know, to receive education, and, you know, because they have access to childcare or be part of the workforce, you know, models behavior for other for their children, and allows them to have a better chance at a more prosperous future. So, you know, very important there. I feel like you've been reading my script, because the other question was going to be what other education bills, you know, that move forward, you know, were impactful this session. If we could turn a little bit towards the future, are you willing to look into a crystal ball at all?
Always. That's my second job.
Terrific. What do we see for 2026 and beyond? What are some of the Senate higher education priorities that you'll be moving forward?
Man, I think we do need to go back into consideration that policy I mentioned of the online out of state. I think that's still relevant, particularly in a economic fiscal cycle with the state that's going to have reduced taxes coming in. We've eliminated the business rent tax and created a number of permanent sales tax reductions. I'm sorry, permanent sales tax holidays. So I am really focused on finding ways to support our colleges and universities with continued investment. And we have had such exponential growth in investments in the higher education system probably in the last 5 years that, in collaboration with Chair Harrell, I want to make sure that we don't take our foot off the gas, and that whether it's the online out of state or there's alternative methods for us to be creative and innovative with our partners in the governor's office and with the House, really want to do it. Also very open to concepts from CAN and from stakeholders across the state on how we can better be supporting students. I in no way am the first or best person full of ideas, but I have that kind of value system that I think is shared across all the folks on this call. And so, you know, I do want to spend the summer leveraging some of those better brains than mine to think through how we can better support college and credential access across the state, and what can we at a systemic level be doing to better support. I'm really hungry for those opportunities and those new ideas. I think the biggest piece for me is that I've learned through my 3 sessions in the Senate at this point is that my idea is certainly not the best one, and that most ideas that end up making it across the finish line during the legislative session are born, or at least presented to me, something like 1 to 2 months before committee weeks begin. So definitely shops open for ideas.
Well, there's 189 attendees on this webinar that are probably waiting to dial the last number for your district office, so you can expect those phones to start blowing up in just a moment. So gotta ask, do you expect next year's session to run 45 days long?
I've already started praying for that not to be the case. I think it all depends on the major initiatives of the president and the speaker. I think, you know, if we look back to this session, the proposal for the reduction of sales tax was presented in week 2 or 3 of session, and that dominated the conversation, and it, ultimately shifted into an alternative method of tax reduction for Floridians. So to me, it would appear that at any time during committee weeks or session, big ideas can be presented that can potentially throw a loop into anyone's planning. So, I think it's best to anticipate new variables, new factors, new ideas can reshape the upcoming legislative session as they did this one. So maybe anticipating new and big ideas at unconventional times is something we should anticipate within the dynamics between the executive, the Senate, and the House, and understanding there's obviously a great deal of tension that took place in public and private conversations between leaders of both chambers. And we obviously are walking into a session that is within the context of those experiences.
Yeah. Well said. Well said. Well, Chair Kaladiud, really want to appreciate you for joining this call. Thank you so much for your time today and for your service to the state of Florida, all the students, all the educators. Thank you so much. And again, there's going to be 189 people calling your office immediately following this webinar. And thank you for being so receptive to all the ideas that may be coming your way.
It's a joy. Thank you for the opportunity, and I'm here to listen, learn, apply the best ideas we possibly can. So thank you all for your work every day.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator. Well, that was a great update, and it's now my pleasure to introduce Nicole Washington, principal and founder of Washington Education Strategies. She is a national education policy advisor based in Miami Beach, focused on integrating work and education to build a stronger talent pipeline in Florida and improving post-secondary education opportunities for all students. She works with state and local organizations to create a more focused, comprehensive education policy and advocacy environment. Nicole has been committed to improving higher education in Florida for many years, serving in roles including the Florida A&M University Board of Trustees, Miami-Dade College Board of Trustees, the University of South Florida Consolidation Task Force, and Associate Director of Governmental Relations for the State University System Board of Governors. Nicole, if you are here, please join, and the virtual floor is yours.
Thank you, Dave, for that kind introduction, and good afternoon, everyone. I do want to add an extra thank you to Senator Kaladiud for her service in the legislature and continuing to be an advocate for students across this state. So as Dave mentioned, I'm going to change direction a bit from policy and talk a little bit about this year's budget that went into effect July 1st. So the legislature approved a $115.1 billion budget, which is an actual 3% decrease from the last year's budget. In addition, the governor vetoed last month approximately a little bit more than $500 million. So that tucks that number down to $114 million, 114.5 range. While this budget was leaner, the state maintained and actually in some cases increased general revenue funding for critical areas like public safety and education. And so today I'm just going to discuss some of the highlights that are most relevant for folks on the call. I'll cover financial aid, state universities, colleges, and workforce education initiatives. So as you can see here, this year, this FSAG was about $269 million. The state continues to prioritize financial aid. If you actually take the combined appropriation for the largest student support programs, which would be Bright Futures, the Florida Student Assistance Grant, or FSAG, and EASE, the total allocation is more than $1 billion. FSAG received 269 million. That was actually flat funded from last year. This will give up to $3,260 to students that are enrolled in technical colleges, state colleges, and universities or private institutions, private colleges. The Bright Futures program increased about 20 million this year. That is Florida's merit-based aid program. The EASE Tuition Assistance Grant, which is for students at independent, nonprofit, and some for-profit schools, is funded at 135.9 million. That is similar to last year. That allows awards for up to $3,500 for about 38,000 students that are at private institutions. There's also language in there similar to last year that allows about $5 million as an additional award for students who are in certain high needs workforce programs. In the financial aid bucket, there's also about 38 million for the Benequisto Scholarship Program, which is the National Merit Scholars. There's 10.5 million for the First Generation and College Matching Grant Program, and about 30 million for other state aid programs. And then we will move to the state universities. So the big budget is a operating budget. It's about $3.9 billion for the 13th year in a row, as Senator Collada you'd mentioned. The budget does not include tuition increases for in-state students, which helps keep Florida the most affordable college in the college system in the country, higher ed system in the country. There is a provision in the implementing bill that allows university boards of trustees to consider raising out-of-state tuition and fees, and some of them will be having conversations about this during their summer board meetings. The legislature again allocated $645 million for performance-based funding initiatives. This is obviously a significant portion of the university budget. For those unfamiliar, Florida's performance-based funding model awards universities for meeting specific metrics related to student success, including graduation rates, job placement, and graduates' average wages. 350 of that is state investment, and then 295 million is redistributed from the base allocation. There is a program of the Programs of Strategic Emphasis Initiative, or also known as BOGO, had some changes this year. So this program is to incentivize students to go into certain programs of strategic emphasis, like engineering and accounting, for the upper division class. For every student that the student, or for every upper division class that the student attends, they get one for free. This year, the funding was reduced about 50% from 39 million to 18.5 million, and it was changed to a last dollar award. So that means that the waiver will be applied to students' out-of-pocket costs after all other financial aid has been applied, and that's new this year. There's $46 million for continued funding for nursing education initiatives, which include the line and pipeline programs. Reflects the strong demand for healthcare professionals in the state. And then obviously there were reductions, as one would expect in a trimmed down budget. In addition to the BOGO program changes, the universities received less funding for preeminence. It was 40 million this year. And also the funds that were set aside the last couple of years to recruit and retain faculty were not included in this year's budget. Florida College System, also known as the FCS, received about $1.68 billion. Again, they have no in-state tuition increases. I do want to note here that thanks to some really great champions in the legislature, the college system received an additional $60 million in workload funding this year. This is in part to offset some of the additional costs associated with some health insurance changes that were made in a bill last year. Additionally, there's 20 million for industry certifications in high skill, high demand areas at Florida colleges. There's continues to be 30 million towards student success incentive funds, which is based on 2+2 transfer rates and workforce success. And similar to the universities, the college received $64 million towards nursing education initiatives, which include both line and the pipeline programs. Workforce education. So the budget also, recognizes the importance of workforce education. It's about $600 million towards that pot. Some key initiatives are the $8.5 million for students earning industry certifications in high skill, high demand wages at technical career centers. There's 20 million for the Pathways to Career Opportunities grant, which is to expand or start new apprenticeship programs and pre-apprenticeship programs. The pot for improving workforce CTE courses and CTE, the Workforce Capitalization Grant helps to fund new equipment and modernization for CTE programs. And then there's also funding similar to last year for the GATE program, which is to get students who've stopped out of high school into career education programs. A couple miscellaneous items. Sarah mentioned earlier that there are changes to the accelerated coursework that is now its own categorical, and there is about $600 million allocated for that. There was also, as Senator Colati you'd mentioned, very focused on making sure that we are preparing the state for the future and making sure that we are paying down our debt. And so there was an additional $800 million allocated to help the state pay off its debt earlier. There was also a note that the back to school tax holiday is now a recurring holiday, so it'll happen every year, and it will be the whole month of August. That kind of wraps it up on my end, Dave. I will welcome you back. Oh, there was a pre-question about communities and school grants. They were funded this year at a little over $20 million. But I thank you all, and I'm open to any questions if there are any.
Well, that's great. We've received several questions. I'm in the fortunate position I just get to ask them, and Nicole and Sarah, you get to answer them. So this is a real role reversal for me. We have a question from Daniel Barkowitz with the University of Miami. What resources, if any, will be provided to local school districts to conduct FAFSA training? Can financial aid advisors help in any way? That's two questions. We allowed Dan to have two questions.
I'll jump in. So the statute does not outline any resources that will be provided to school districts to conduct FAFSA training. I'll just add, but considering this is a curriculum requirement, I would foresee curriculum providers updating content for the course. And for the second piece about the FAA, the financial aid administrators, yes, I think it's kind of an all hands on deck mission. I think financial aid advisors can help, as well as the Department of Ed, Office of Student Financial Aid, for trainings, webinars, and other FAFSA related activities. Also, the role of school counselors and the teachers of that financial literacy course is crucial. So there's lots of opportunity from the state and local level.
Excellent, excellent. Sounds like it is an opportunity for everybody to pull together and help get robust FAFSA instruction into the classrooms. Catherine Lehman is a grant director with the Immokalee Foundation, asked a very specific question: what funding is available for workforce development? Nicole, you kind of ran through some of that. Is there anything? There's $8.5 million of incentives for districts to earn industry certifications in high skill, high demand areas. There's the $20 million for the Pathways to Career Opportunities grant program to expand pre-apprenticeship and apprenticeship programs for high school and college students. $5 million for Grow Your Own Teacher registered apprenticeships, $40 million for workforce development capitalization, and $7 million for GATE, $4 million for GATE Startup, and $1 million for GATE Program Performance Fund. Were there any new funds provided this year in the budget beyond specific line item appropriations for programs that community-based organizations you might avail themselves to?
Not that I'm aware of. That's, pretty much the rundown. It's been, we bat around there. There was a bill that we didn't talk about that actually requires some transparency around apprenticeship grants and how school districts and the industry partners contract to do apprenticeships. So there's been some conversation around increasing transparency. And it talks about increasing funding. They're looking at the workforce funding model also again last year and probably will this year, but no specific funds for community-based organizations.
Yeah. And you were talking about Rep. Mello's bill that also, I think, pushed back the apprenticeship report to better align with some of the availability of data. As a data guy, I'm all about, fresh data. So that's great. Michelle Wallace, who's an adult education coordinator at Seminole State College of Florida, wants to know if the certificate of completion is being eliminated, what is replacing it, or what will be the new policy? Can we dive a little bit deeper into that?
Yes, thank you for the question, Michelle. And I saw another in the chat about the date. So what's new is the DOE will be producing a document by January 1st of 2026 that lists the options available to students that fail to earn a high school diploma. So within that document, it must include career programs, adult education to earn a standard high school diploma or high school equivalency diploma, information on apprenticeship programs, and the GATE program. The district will provide this document to each student along with his or her official transcript. So that is new, this new document DOE will be producing. What's staying the same in statute is these students they can still remain at that high school as a full-time student or part-time student up to 1 year and receive instruction to remedy any deficiencies in order to obtain that standard high school diploma. So still have that same option, but again, this new document will definitely be a resource to those students.
Yeah. And Michelle has followed up live and in real time with a question about who in the Department of Ed will be developing the document of options so that individual institutions can make sure their programs for optional completion are listed. Do we know that answer?
Michelle, I'm looking at the statute 1105 right now. It says the department shall develop. I don't see a specific.
I think Michelle wants a name and a number. We'll do our best to get that for you. So another question from Principal Trent Daniel of Oviedo High School would like someone to explain in detail the new requirements for AP dual enrollment and CTE funding. How will that acceleration supplement work? Nicole, thank you for coming off mute. You just made some
It can come off mute, but it's going to be a very disappointing answer. This obviously passed in the last week of session. And the department is, per the statute, the department has to come up with a form, and I believe they are working through the process. We will, I know this is an area that a lot of people are concerned about. We will do our best to follow up when we have more information.
Yeah. Oh, and there we go. You're very welcome, Principal Daniel. Good luck with the upcoming school year. And again, as Nicole said, we'll get that information out as soon as we can. It's going to be very interesting, and certainly some of the work that led to the initial legislation, which would have halved the FTE bonus weights, had a lot to do with seemingly some unclear information about those expenses. So I think the intent here is let's find a way for districts and institutions to better track the expenditure of these acceleration dollars, so that we can, make better and more informed decisions. So the Savannah Rains of the USF Office of Veteran Success has a question relating to House Bill 1255. How will the changes in Bright Futures eligibility be shared with students of military families? Sarah, do you want to tackle that one?
Yes. There's not a central channel for the distribution of this information. I would say it's important that we all do our part, as veteran offices at universities, or others in this network, to share out this information. And Savannah, that might be a good point to raise with the Office of Student Financial Aid. How is this information being distributed? Great point.
Stella Cervantes, who's a program coordinator at the University of Central Florida, had a question. Does the new budget allow for funding community schools?
I think, Dave, that's the one that I did answer. The Community and School Fund is funded this year. It's about $20 million, and then there's some additional funds for UCF to administer the program. So those funds did make it into the budget this year.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you. Monica Hammett, who's a college counseling coordinator at Oxbridge Academy, would like to know, and this might be a benefit for everybody on the call. We certainly hope it is the answer to this question. How can people get more involved with the legislative process?
You can always tune into the Florida channel or attend committee meetings in person if you're able. Florida operates in the sunshine, meaning that, Florida government must conduct business transparently and openly. Meetings are always noticed and open to the public. So really depending on your level of engagement, you can always get involved in that way. I would recommend, if you're new to the process, just first engage in a bit of info gathering. Find out who your state representative is, state senator is, even local government, who are your elected council members, and see what policies, what legislation they're proposing. You can always subscribe to office updates, newsletters, as well as contact and express your positions to legislative offices directly. You can also subscribe to FCAN's mailing list. We produce pre-session, during session, and post-session updates and briefs to keep our audiences informed. Great question.
There was one question from Vivian Posey about slides with the information. Vivian, I will like to let you know that this is a shameless plug for FCAN. Most of the information I got came from the FCAN budget update.
Thank you for that, Nicole. And there was another question in there related to where will we be able to find a recording of this webinar? The answer is in your email inbox within 1 week. Whatever email you use to register, you'll get a link to the recording of this video. I am scrolling through.
There's a question about Open Door. It was funded this year at 35 million. However, the funding was changed from recurring to non-recurring. So that means that next year in order for it to go back into the budget, it will have to be reconsidered during the legislative session.
Gotcha. Stephen Crudup has asked a question. We have already heard that many high school counselors intend to send dual enrollment students to the Florida college system to take financial literacy because they may be unable to take on the demand. Is there any provision for support at the FCS schools to take on that additional enrollment or staffing?
So that would be, however, the new accelerated mechanism is going to work. Those additional enrollments would be captured in that process.
And also, I would imagine in the articulation agreement between the district and the FCS institution. Yeah. Let's see. There is a question related to, are there any changes in the costs for private school students to take dual enrollment? Any changes to private school students taking Florida Virtual School?
No changes to private dual enrolled students, still eligible for the dual enrollment scholarship. Again, the private school would just need to enter into an articulation agreement with that post-secondary institution.
Thank you for that. There is a question. Judy Scavino has asked, high schools and districts are always concerned about their graduation rate. Will there be a separate coding for students who do not graduate, now will not get a certificate of completion, and yet are allowed to remain at their school for one more year? How does that impact the graduation rate? Long and short of it is, to graduate, you need to have a standard diploma within 4 years of entering ninth grade. So the changes to the certificate of completion, as far as I understand, will not change any thing related to the graduation rate. So that looks to be about it. Well, Nicole, Sarah, thank you all very much. Thank you all for attending today's webinar. Reminder, the recording will be available in your email within 1 week. I want to thank once again Senator Calatayud for her wonderful remarks. Apologies that we had a little bit of video difficulty, but it made at least me focus on the words quite a bit more. So with that, on behalf of the Florida College Access Network and all the team here, thank you very much for joining this webinar, and I hope you have a great day.